Hi, it's Rob from the Bush and Boltgun. Today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to paint a Crimson Fist Space Marine. So initially the miniature has been sprayed with Army Painter Ultramarine Blue. We're now going to use some Citadel Kantor Blue to give this a nice dark coat of blue. I'll use the Army Painter for this one. I think a undercoat of black would probably go quite well with it as well, because that'd darken the blue down a little bit, because the Crimson Fists do have that very dark blue colour for their armour. But this colour works fine. Next we're going to be using a little bit of Vallejo Black, but any black will do it. Mainly using this to do the joints between the armour, like the seals, and also the body of the bolt rifle. This is another video which was started some time ago. I think I started this sometime after Indomitus came out, it was. I just hadn't got around to finishing it, so we've now got the start of this video like some of the other ones recently. The start of it is filmed like this, and the second half of it is filmed from above like the newer videos. So now I'm going to use Vallejo Panzer Ace's Flesh base, but if you want a similar colour in the Citadel range, Cadian Fleshtone is probably a good one for it. It looks very bright on the miniature here, but the end result if you use the Cadian Fleshtone is probably just as good. Felt I had to do a Crimson Fist fairly early on. The first chapter I ever laid eyes on, when I got the old 30 beakies box set years and years ago. Next up is Citadel Retributor armour. I'm going to be using this to do some of the little details, but nothing really too big on them. Here's the box of 30 beige plastic beakies, and also on the cover of the old Rogue Trader, which is the rulebook that we used for years. And the Crimson Fists were always on the cover of everything then, and they were always a favourite. So I'm going to be using a little bit of Vallejo Model Air Chrome. Be using this for the chest eagle and the bolt rifle. Also some of the smaller details dotted about, like the bit that goes around the back of his head. Now looking at a lot of the more recent artwork, they seem to have just the one fist red. Now, originally they had both fists, and so in this video, because it's a bit of a hat tip to the first Marines I ever painted, he's having both fists red, like on the cover of the old Rogue Trader there. So I'm going to use Citadel Mephiston Red to get that first red base coat on there. And it's also worth noting it's another chapter that's got some great lore behind it. Especially of the Space Marines Battles Rin's World book. It's a really, really good story that I really enjoyed reading that. If you want something to inspire you to do Crimson Fist, that's probably the book that's going to do it. So with the hands done, we're now going to use a little bit of Citadel Mornfang Brown, and this is going to be to do the holster and his pouches. So as always, doing these pouches for the Marines with the Mornfang Brown, making them look like a little bit of worn leather. So I'm tempted to do a little bit of a video on these just to show the full start to finish of doing those scuffs and chafes on it. I do quite like the look of that. It does make them look worn and not fresh out the box with every battle. Now we're going to use a little bit of Citadel Rakarth flesh, and this is just going to be used to do the little scroll work on the bolt rifle. I'm pretty sure there's nothing else on it. It's quite a plain intercessor, this guy. Now we're going to use the first of the shades. We're going to use Citadel Reikland Fleshshade. So we want to give him a reasonable covering of this. So that darkens that skin down a little bit, also gets into the recesses and makes all the details stand out. Once we're done with that, we are going to use a little bit of Citadel Druchii Violet. I'm going to use this to paint over the crimson of the fists. So do that on both fists, and then I've got the little design on the shield there. And other than the red and the blue on the shield, I'll be painting a white fist onto that shield. And that will be for part of the chapter badge tutorial. We paint up the red fist on the shoulder and also a white one on the shield, just to show a little bit more of how that's done in a bit clearer way. Now I'm going to use Citadel Nuln Oil Gloss. I'm going to use this on all of the Vallejo Model Air Chrome areas. That's because I want the detail to stand out, but also want the chrome to remain shiny. So it's an ideal shade to use if you want that effect. In contrast, when I do the Chaos Marines, I will use Citadel Nuln Oil, just because that darkens it and makes it look a little bit more grimy, not quite as well looked after. So even just looking at the kit on the Marines, I try and have them looking a bit different too. So next up is a bit of Citadel Nuln Oil Shade. We're actually going to paint this onto the blue armour, and this is another way to get that blue looking a lot darker. So always the different coloured shades on different coloured paints will have a different effect overall when you're looking at it and how you perceive it. So by putting the black shade in rather than the dark blue, it does make it stand out and look a little bit darker. We're also using the Nuln Oil on the leather holster and pouches. Once dry, we're going to start off using Citadel Retributor Armour. We're going to start reapplying the gold to the few areas that have it. Very quick layer this, and it's very quick to do all the gold parts because there's only a few. Now I'm going to use Citadel Liberator Gold just to highlight the gold that we've just put on. Next up, we're going to use a little bit of Vallejo Model Air Chrome mixed in with Liberator Gold. And with that, we're going to do one final highlight on all the gold areas. It's more of like an edge highlight, this. And once again, it's a very quick layer to do. And with that, we have the new camera angle. Now we're going to start returning to the armour. We're going to use Citadel Kantor Blue. I'm going to reapply the blue to all of these armour plates. Now you want to leave the shade in the recesses and in the areas that are kind of the underside of the armour. So parts of the front of that shin, and then the undersides of the legs and the arms where it will be shaded. You're just going to leave the shade in there rather than highlighting them. Now we're going to mix a little bit of Caledor Sky with the Kantor Blue just to add a really slight highlight. Now one thing that I really liked about the Crimson Fist was that they were very, very dark blue. They looked quite muted and subdued. So I wanted to try and keep that going with this guy by mixing a little bit of Caledor Sky, so you've got that slight highlight for it. You can tell it's there, but it's not too bright. I'm just going to use some pure Caledor Sky, and this is just going to be to do edge highlights. Now, as always, just when you're looking to do those edge highlights on the top edges that are going to be catching the light, by just having that subdued highlight and then having the edges done with the Caledor Sky, it does give it a dark blue look, but also means that you still see those highlights to pick out the details. Next up, we're going to use Citadel Khorne Red. I'm going to reapply or apply this to the areas that we did Mephiston Red earlier. I went for this as the coat here because I just thought it gave it more of a crimson fist colour rather than having the kind of bright red hand. It'd be more of that kind of deep red hand. Once you've applied that, we can move on to the next colour, which is going to be Citadel Wazdakka Red. We're now going to highlight those areas that we've just painted with the Khorne Red. So you want to be thinking about where the light is catching this, and just adding it to those areas. With the Khorne Red and the Wazdakka Red as it is, it does give you that really nice dark crimson. I suppose almost like the kind of red wine colour. And do one final highlight on that with a little bit of Citadel Pink Horror. And this is just going to be for those edges that are going to be catching the light to give them a little highlight. I do think this is a really nice colour scheme with the both fists crimson and the darker blue. They do work really well together. Now going to go onto his skin, we're going to use Citadel Cadian Fleshtone to start building this back up again. Like so. I don't want it to lighten too much, so rather than using white, I'm using Citadel Rakarth Flesh. I've added a little bit of that to the Cadian Fleshtone, and we're just going to pick out all the details and highlight those now. Really do like the heads that you get with the intercessors. There's some cracking detail on them. Like from the expressions on the face, they've got the teeth and all kinds, but they're really detailed. It's worth taking your time and giving them a good effort. Now I'm going to do a little bit of white mixed in with the previous mix. I'm just going to do a little bit more of a highlight to these areas. When you've got that done, we can move on to the next colour, which is going to be Vallejo White, and we're going to use this to paint his eyes and also his teeth. So as always, if you want to paint the eyes, slightly off camera here, sorry, you want to be dragging the very tip of the paintbrush away from the nose towards the outside of the eye, and that's the best way to get the actual line of the eye in place. If you do happen to go over the edges, you can correct that using a little bit of shade or something along those lines, but I'll link up a tutorial on how to paint the eyes here so you can see that. Now we're just going to use a little bit of Vallejo Black to paint the pupil on his eyes. You're just going to be doing a little slight spot on each eye with that. If you get a little bit too much black on there, you can just use a little bit of white to touch that up and get the eye looking normal again. Like so. Also going to use the black to do his hair and recolour that. I'll just use this moment to touch up any parts of the bolt rifle as well, so that you've got all that matte black back on the body. So this is what we're going to be doing here, is the bolt rifle and also the sections between the armour plates. to make sure any blue or red or any other colours that you've got on there, we are replacing those. Apologies for slightly off camera here. But if you use the black to do all of the kind of ribbed seals between the armour plates, you've got those tubes going up from the side of his waist up to the power pack. Also the case of his bolt rifle. And just get that matte black back in place for that. From there we are going to be using a little bit of Vallejo German grey to paint up the highlights on the bolt rifle and also the tubing. If you don't have German grey, Eschen grey is a fairly close match to it. The Eschen grey is slightly lighter, but it will work, not too bad. But you mainly want to be thinking about where the light is coming from and highlighting those areas, because you don't want the black areas to look like they are just dark grey. I'm going to use a little bit of Citadel Mechanicus standard grey. I'm just going to highlight the areas that we've just done with the black here. Because the way his rifle is, it's mainly going to be the horizontal lines which are going to be catching the light, but some of those other details on the bolt rifle will also catch the light, as it's not perfectly vertical, so you will get some highlighting on some of those near vertical edges too. Now I'm going to work on the little scroll on his bolt rifle. I'm going to start with a little bit of Citadel Rakarth flesh and start to bring some colour back to this. I do want to make sure you leave the shade in the recesses. Try and just get those details to stand out a little bit more. I was looking for a purity seal there, but there isn't one on him. It is just this little scroll. So what we've done is we've added a little bit of Vallejo White to the Rakarth flesh. We're just highlighting and doing some of the edges of the bolt rifle scroll here. Again, you want to leave some of the Rakarth flesh and then some of the shade showing through so that you get that nice different layers of colour, so it's getting lighter towards the edges. I'm just going to add a little bit more white to that. Do one final little highlight on it. Slightly off screen there, but just one final highlight here. We can move on to the next colour. Going to work on the pouches and the holster now. So we're going to start with Citadel Mornfang Brown again. You want to reapply this colour, making sure that you leave some of the shade in the recesses. Also done the strap in Mornfang Brown, so we're going to do the same details on the strap as we do on the pouches. So you want to get that Mornfang Brown back into place, leaving the shade in the recesses and in a little concave part of the front of the holster there. Next up, we're going to add some Citadel Rakarth flesh to the Mornfang Brown. We're just going to start highlighting these pouches. Now what you can't see here, moving up to the middle here, is I'm basically going down the corners of the pouches, as you'll see here, and around the edges, and giving them a little rough highlight. Now if you're going down the vertical edges, you want to be going side to side, and if you're going along the bottom edge, you want to be going up and down with those little things, just to make it look like it has been scraped and scratched. You don't want a perfectly smooth line going down, otherwise it looks too uniform. We're going to add a little bit more Citadel Rakarth flesh to the previous mix, and we are going to just add that highlight onto the areas that we've just done. Again, we're doing a rough highlight too. You don't want to be doing nice straight edges, you want that jaggedness, just to make sure that those edges do look like they have been scuffed and they are rough. It does look quite bright when it's getting applied this, but once it dries it does tone down a little bit and it does look pretty nice. Okay, so now we're going to do the lens on his scope. going to use a little bit of Citadel Mephiston Red. If you haven't painted this Mephiston Red already, just get some Mephiston Red on there. You can do the highlights and then use a little bit of shade in the top right area of it, or you can use Mephiston Red, shade with Druchii Violet, and then just reapply the Mephiston Red like we just did. I'm going to add a little bit of Vallejo White to the Mephiston Red. We are going to do a little crescent on the bottom left hand side of this, probably about 45–50% of the lens on the bottom left hand side you want to do with the first crescent. And next up we want to be adding a little bit more white and then doing a slightly smaller crescent. Okay, so this is quite a tricky one to see. We're just going to use pure white now and just do the little light reflections on it. You can't really see this from looking at the miniature from any angle from the side, so we're now just going to put two little spots of reflection there and a really thin reflection running up one side of it there, and call it a day with that lens. So now I'm going to start working on the shoulder badges. We're going to use Vallejo Black. All you want to do is draw a circle on each shoulder because they have their icons within a black circle with that red border to it. So get a nice round circle on the go there. We had one of the videos up last week. We're going to have the next one up next week so that you can do both of those shoulders. I'll show you how to do the icons of them in slow time or step by step in those videos. You'll see parts of it here, but you will see the full process in the videos that I'll tag up here when they're out. So it's now Citadel Khorne Red. We're just going to put the outer border on both the shoulders. You'll then be drawing the Crimson Fist chapter badge on his left shoulder, and within the circle on the other side you'll be doing a battle line marking, which is like the usual arrow that you do for the battle line markings, which I'll post up a link to here, but that'll be joined onto the bottom of the circle. So you'll see that as this video progresses, but you'll also get a step by step coming up probably this weekend. So now they've got those in place, we are going to use a little bit of Citadel Kantor Blue, and we're just going to smooth off the edges around the borders and make sure that they are both round. So when you're putting these circles on, sometimes you might splay the brush a little bit or have a little rough edge on there somewhere, and all we're doing here is just tidying it up and getting those red borders so that they are smooth and the same width all the way round. Okay, so with the chapter badge and the arrow battle line marking in place, I'm going to use a little bit of Vallejo White. We are just going to do two stripes down here to do the numerals. Crimson Fist don't show company colours, they just have their squad number and their designation, like the battle line markings on there. And here I'm just going to be doing a fist, and this is come from the Crimson Fist's how to paint their chapter badge tutorial. I did the one on one shoulder because it's the red on the black, it didn't show up quite so well, so I did one on this little bit here in white. Then you can see step by step on that video how to do the fist on that badge. So now we're going to be doing a little bit of Vallejo Model Air Chrome. We are just going to be using this to paint the studs on his head and pick out the studs on his pouches. You can see there I got a little bit of extra silver on that spot, and all I'm using is a little bit of Citadel Nuln Oil to go over that and darken that up, and that is the finished Crimson Fist. I'm really happy with how he turned out. I love the look of this chapter, so I am tempted to do a few more in the future, but this tutorial I'm quite happy with how he finished.
Thanks for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Also, think about subscribing to some of our other social media linked below. Thanks very much.
If you enjoy the channel and you like the content and you'd like to support us, our Patreon and Ko-fi pages are linked below. Thanks very much.